So I am going to go ahead and just tell you a little bit about myself. I am an adult programming librarian here at the Advanced Learning Library, and I have been on the team for over a year and a half. I help facilitate the Read ICT Reading Challenge, which is an adult reading challenge that we encourage our customers to participate in. It's a year-long reading challenge, and I'll get into that a little bit later. But that's one of the main duties that I oversee here at the Wichita Public Library, and I really enjoy it. I also help with the podcast that we've launched recently that we explore some of those categories in depth. And so I get to reach out to people and talk about those different categories. So that's fun for me. I didn't necessarily start out wanting to be an adult programming librarian. I actually went to library school to be a children's librarian because I was really passionate about promoting literacy for children. But on that quest, I found out that there's all kinds of different types of literacies, and it doesn't have to stop with children's books. And so I became really passionate about digital literacy. So when I was in college or in library school, that was an emphasis of mine. And I was also, I'm a bilingual speaker. So teaching literacy to our non-native speakers is really a good passion of mine. I love working for the Wichita Public Library, and I love working on my team because the folks that work in adult programming all have such varied reading interest. And so I like to find out what other people are reading. It might not be something I'm reading, but I'm always curious about what other people find interesting. And so that helps me expand my reading goals as well. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen right now, but that's just a little bit about me. And let me go ahead and boot up our book club. Okay. So book club reboot. This may seem like kind of a techie play on theme, and it was. One of the books that you saw in the beginning of the waiting room was called Book Club Reboot, and I really liked that book. When I read it, it is just a compilation of different book clubs that libraries have started all over the country. And two of the ladies that write the book, or one of them in particular, she surveys different libraries. And so it's this idea of, okay, book clubs are not anything new to libraries, but what are ways that we can reinvent book clubs? Because sometimes our readership falls off, or, sometimes topics aren't as relevant as they were when book clubs were first started. And so this idea of rebooting a book club was really appealing to me, because that's something that we try to do at the library too. And a lot of the book clubs that we have here that are library sponsored started off with a staff member being a facilitator, but really it took hold from the community members. And so those are the folks that are actually running the book clubs. And those are the people that are generating questions or taking time to do that extra research. So why join a book club, right? Books are meant to be discussed as much as they're meant to be read alone. And one thing that I really liked about being in college was that we're all reading the same book and we're all discussing it. It can be very insightful to have a discussion about a book that we're not necessarily familiar with the context. So we all read for pleasure, and the books that we read for pleasure are things that we're interested in. When you're in a book club, you might have books that you would never pick up otherwise. And so being in a collective group where you can read the same thing and discuss it, it's a lot more fun than just reading a book that you might not have picked up otherwise on your own. And so that segues into the second topic. Book clubs are more fun than school, and they are, because you're choosing to be in this club, right? It's not something that you're assigned, you're not being graded on, there's no wrong answer. And hopefully, if the group norms are going well in your group or your club, you're feeling supported in the opinions that you're sharing with your members. Book clubs enhance the material. So again, if you were talking about hard subjects, and there are people in your club from diverse backgrounds, this is going to help enhance the material you're reading because you're going to garner different perspectives, more so than you would get with just your inner circle or your family. And then you can explore new authors and genres. And a lot of people who are in book clubs, they're able to do that. They're able to tap into new authors because everybody kind of assumes that they're going to read the same book, and that way you don't have to like it to be able to read it and to talk about it. And so it's a great way for you to just kind of try something new without feeling bad about picking up a book that you might have thought was good on your own and it wasn't. There are many types of book clubs. We've got our traditional book clubs. So these are the book clubs that meet in libraries or meet in coffee shops, meet in bookstores, those types of book clubs that you would think of. Some fun and interesting clubs that I saw in that book club Reboot, were cookbook clubs. And this is something that I thought would be super fun to be part of. A bunch of folks just getting together, reading the same books, preparing meals. I know with COVID, it makes it a little difficult to have potlucks, but as we progress as a society and become more comfortable with people outdoors and vaccinations and whatnot, this is something that could definitely be reimagined, because everybody loves sharing food. And sometimes I don't know if any of you are fans of cooking shows. I certainly am. I love even the worst cooks in America, but some of the best ones too, like Top Chef or that sort of stuff. If you have a recipe, it can, even if everyone has the same recipe, a dish can be made so many different ways. So the subtle nuances, just like the answers you would give in a traditional book club, might be similar, but also varied. The same can be said with cookbook clubs. There's a third club called Clubs Without Reading. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, because why would you join a book club without required reading? But sometimes it's just about reading in general. And I find that these types of clubs happen to be clubs that are targeted toward audience members that may not be, they may not all have the same reading interests. So like teenagers, when I was reading that book, the book club Reboot, they mentioned that there were several book clubs where it was, you either had a space where people could come and read, like a quiet reading room. Some of the bigger universities have those reading rooms in their university libraries, or you have like a YA book club where you're encouraging people to come and read and just share space. One book club idea I had that didn't necessarily get approved, but I thought it was a rad idea, was to have a read-in where we could have our participants come to the Advanced Learning Library and read on the terrace. Now this was again before COVID and all of these social distancing restraints, but just the idea of getting people together and reading and then talking about what they're reading. So we don't necessarily all have to read the same item, but we can all come prepared to share what we are reading. I see Amanda saying she likes that idea. I like it too. One thing that I'll mention is with our Read ICT reading challenge, the folks that log their books and complete all 12 categories, at the end of the year, we do a winner roundup where that's what we do. We get together and we discuss the books that we liked for the year and the ones that we didn't like and what we're reading. And it's so fascinating because your TBR pile, that's to be read pile, just keeps growing and growing. And it can get a little overwhelming, but you know, a lot of people love it. And it looks like Amanda says her elementary school does that. Yeah, her kids' elementary school does that. It's true. There's a lot of groups out there where it's like you just read. My daughter, she goes to Riverside and she does, they have a primetime reading. So it's kind of the same thing where they just spend a whole day reading. They bring their sleeping bags and they, you know, cuddle up on the gym floor and they just read whatever they want. And then there's a lot of different activities for them to do that are reading inspired, but just getting comfortable with reading, seeing your friends reading, or community members, what have you. And so that's really fun. Lastly, there is a celebrity book club. So everybody knows about Oprah, and Reese Witherspoon has one. Emma Roberts has one. Kaya Gerber, who's Cindy Crawford's daughter, has one. Jenna Bush Hager has one. There's so many different celebrities now that have reading book clubs. Even former President Obama, he does a reading list. So it's not quite a club, but he'll issue a list every year where you can see what his top books are. And that's really fun to see. So there's all kinds of book clubs out there. You don't have to be joining a book club just to see the same faces every day. There's plenty of opportunities out either locally or outside of town where you can, and nationally, where you can participate in reading challenges or reading clubs. One thing to say, not reiterate, but to say is that if you are in a formal or traditional book club, it's really important that you establish group norms, and that just gets everybody on the same page, because you know, book discussion clubs can have differing opinions. And so it's really important that everybody kind of follows these guidelines in order to keep everybody on track and make sure everybody's feeling validated and their opinions are feeling validated. So these are some good norms to establish if you're interested in creating a book club, or things to revisit if you're already in a book club. So make your best effort to complete the book. Okay, duh, that's number one. Everybody knows that one. But seriously, like if you're in the club and you want to read the book, to be part of the discussion, you should definitely read the book. Now, you can listen to it on audio. There's nothing wrong with that. You can read it as an ebook. Sometimes I like to do that. I like to jump between formats, just depending on how my day works. But definitely be prepared to have read the book, because that lends to thoughtful discussion. Come ready to share and listen. And is so important, and listen. Like, we all want to share our thoughts about something, especially if we have strong feelings, but it's really important also to listen to what other people are saying too, and validate those opinions, because that warrants someone to discuss in the future. You know, if we aren't creating an inclusive environment, then our book club might not have a high attendance number. So if you're reevaluating, like, oh, we've had a drop in our book club participants, maybe revisit those group norms so that way everybody's on the same page. Third, it says be ready to defend your opinions with the why. So everybody has strong opinions and we want to share those, but be prepared to say why you feel that way. And we'll get into that a little later when we talk about leader norms, but because they may play devil's advocate and ask you why you feel that way, but it's okay. You know, we don't need to say blanket statements. There's no right or wrong answer, but you should be willing to defend your answer, especially if you feel like it's right in your mind. And that might not be just to be right, but also give someone an opportunity to defend their opinion, and then leave it at that. Self-censor. This is a hard one for me. I struggle with self-censoring with writing, with talking, anything like that. So that's a norm that I always have to work on. But one healthy habit that I always try and remember for myself is seek first to understand and then to be understood. So even though I have the urge to speak and I want to speak, sometimes if I listen, I don't necessarily have to speak as often. And then last, have fun. Like, this is a voluntary experience, and you're there to make connections with your community members and hopefully, you know, further your outlook. So go with it, go into it with a positive mindset, because again, this isn't school, this isn't required, and there's a lot to be learned and also achieved by following these norms. And it probably will mean that your book club is successful if everyone's on the same page. So we have our group norms. If you are a leader of a book club, these are really important norms for you as an individual. Again, read the entire book, right? And we don't need to go into that, but it's important that you're familiar with the material. Gather information to help enhance the discussion. So a lot, and we'll talk about this with our book sets that we have at the library, but a lot of book sets come with discussion questions. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. There are plenty of questions thoughtfully drafted that are tailored to each book that you use, but also you can get on the internet and you can find book discussion questions for certain books. I know I did that recently with the Circe Madeline Miller novel, because we did that for Big Read, and we actually hadn't had a book set yet for the library. So I went online and I went to the NEA Big Read website and looked at those discussion questions. So there's a lot of resources out there online that you can do to enhance the discussion. Offer counter opinions. That's really important. You know, a lot of times people agree, but that may not be the most productive use of your time. So if everybody's kind of has the same feeling about a character or plot, it might be nice to offer some counter opinions just to get your participants thinking more broadly about the book, instead of narrowing in on what they liked about it. Supply discussion when necessary. I'm sure that we've all been in group settings where there are few people that dominate the conversation and others that don't. So it's really nice to supply discussions when it's necessary, especially when you're meeting for the first time or two, because people might just not feel comfortable in that setting right away, or, you know, we all have walls that we put up when we're in new situations. And so by supplying discussion when necessary, you kind of fill in the gap. So not only to supply discussion, but then facilitate discussion. So if someone is taking up too much time and other people want to speak, you know, being that facilitator and letting them know, okay, it's great to hear from you. Now let's hear from so-and-so about what they want to share. And that comes into play often when you're in group settings, because again, we have people who have very dominant personalities who want to share, and then we have other people who are more, they're introverts, and it's harder for them to speak out in a group. So make sure that you're facilitating the discussion and it's not weighted on one side, but that it's equally distributed. And then, you know, if you're having a hard time with your club one night and it looks like, you know, things are going off the rails, I would say go back to your group norms and check them, you know, and just let them know, hey, these are the things that we have all agreed upon, and we're getting off track. So let's get back on track so we can have a productive evening or a meeting. And there's nothing wrong with that. You being in a facilitator role, you're obligated to do that. So, you know when to step in and let your participants understand that nobody's feelings have to be hurt, or, you know, everyone can share their opinions, but then we also have to respect other people as well. So here's some tips for choosing your next read. And these are some really good basic suggestions. I'm sure if you're already in a book club, you all have a format or a protocol for how you pick your books. But if you're just getting started, here's some good tips for you, just so you have a foundation. Don't pick something universally liked. I know that's so hard. Everybody wants to read that buzz book, or everybody wants to read the book everyone's talking about. And here's the secret about book sets. Even though we have over 70 sets, they're checked out a lot. So it pays to be flexible with book club books, especially if you've read a lot of books for your club. It pays to be flexible, and it pays to pick books that you normally wouldn't read. So that might mean stepping outside of a genre that your members are comfortable with and picking something new. Goodreads and Novelist Plus are great resources for folks looking for synopses of books, or they create all kinds of lists. I use it a lot when I'm building carousels for the Read ICT, our different categories. Novelists and Goodreads are very similar, but one caveat to say is that Goodreads is crowdsourced. So even though it is run by bookish people, and they are fanatics, they love reading, they're just normal people. Some of them may work in the book industry, some of them may be librarians, some of them may just like reading, but it's crowdsourced the same way that Wikipedia is. Novelist is a database that compiles different accredited publications. So you've got book lists, you've got a bunch of different publications that are generating book reviews. So those folks are getting paid, and that's the skinny. They are getting paid to write book reviews, whereas the folks on Goodreads might be just passionate about it as a side hobby. So when I refer people to look for, they're doing book reviews, or they need to really find something that's authoritative, I point them in the direction of Novelist. But Goodreads is great for just making book lists. And again, I use it a lot when I'm making book lists for Read ICT. WPL book sets and librarians. So I mentioned that we have lots of book sets, and there's a slide later that talks about them. But yeah, if you don't know what you want to read, you can hop onto our website, wichitalibrary.org. And under one of the services is book sets, and you can see a full listing of all the titles that we own. And each book set has at least 10 titles with it. If there are book sets that have less, we interlibrary loan those for free. So we borrow those from other libraries at no charge to your participants. And you can also ask librarians. There's so many people at the library that have strong readers advisory skills. I can't promote them, and I couldn't list all of them, but I mean, if you're looking for occult books, or if you're looking for mysteries or cozy mysteries or historical fiction or nonfiction, there's so many different librarians that can help you out. And one plug that I will do, I didn't put it in the slide, but right now we're doing recommended reading lists for people. And that's for folks that are just getting started, may not know what they want to read. They can fill out an online form, and then our librarians get back with them with suggestions. So feel free to use that service for your book clubs too. If you guys are finding yourself stumped, or you're just looking for something new, you can access that form from our website as well. And look for books with dimensional characters. So these are folks that, without explaining every single bullet, these are characters that are complex, that might be making decisions that we as a reader would really struggle with. But in their setting, it made sense to them. A unique style, frame, or setting. So how it's written, where it's written, the tone. I can think of a few books, like Octavia Butler's book has a unique style to it, but also the setting and frame. And you can also choose books that have ambiguous endings that might, depending on your club, make your participants a little frustrated. But sometimes we don't need a nice packaged bow ending. We need to think about it a little further than just a simple fairy tale ending. And then things that explore basic human truths. So those are things that we're all struggling with. You can pick up a book that may not be a character like you or anyone in your family or even in your community, but they still struggle with the same basic human truths. So as I mentioned, WPL, Wichita Public Library, we have book sets. Oh, it looks like we have over 100, I misspoke. And each set has 10 copies. Charles Hankins is the point person for the book sets. He does all the organizing for the book clubs. And all you have to do is just create an agreement with him. And it's a contract, but he loans those book sets out. I believe they check out for 6 weeks. So your book club has plenty of time to pick up those copies, and he'll send them out to whichever branch you've indicated. And like I said, you can find a complete list of all of those books online. Racine Zakula is our fiction selector, and she just shared with me a whole new list of book sets that I don't even think are on the website. So if you all are curious about that, you can let me know and I can email you that list. It was too long to make a slide out of it. So, but I do have it archived. So if you'd like a copy of those new titles that are from the last year or two, I can go ahead and share those with you. So I mentioned this in the beginning, why I wanted to kind of revisit this topic about restarting a book club or rebooting it. 2020 was a hard year, and it was a hard year for everyone, including those that are in book clubs. Some of those book clubs have been able to gracefully transition online and are still meeting. But if you're like me, this year has been really hard, and all of my social engagements or commitments have pretty much fallen by the wayside. And when I'm not working, it's really hard for me to want to jump on a computer and meet virtually. So I felt like this was a really relevant program to have. Why would you change up your book club? People aren't coming. Again, it could just be that you had a lot of attendance in the beginning, and then people's lives got busy, and things happen. Maybe your participants are burnt out, or they're too busy or bored, and if those are the cases, you might consider, is your book club meeting community needs, or is the meeting time and location not working? Again, if it's on a Wednesday evening when a lot of people are doing church or if they've got children that are in after school activities, it might be difficult. So there's a lot of different reasons why attendance could be low, and it might not necessarily be the books that you're reading. It just might be people's lives have gotten busy. So here's a way to help reinvigorate your book club. I say mix it up. So change your scenery. If you're traditionally meeting at the same place every time, and that is really good for people who need consistency, but then your membership is dropping, consider maybe meeting somewhere else. I can't speak to all of the book clubs that were library sponsored, but I know some of them are still meeting. Several of our branches have book clubs that meet. So if you're interested in joining a library book club, I can share with you the staff information for each branch that has a liaison. But like the Evergreen Library, I believe it had 2 book clubs. Alfred has a book club, Westlink has a book club, and Rockwell has 2 book clubs. Some of those book clubs are meeting virtually. I'm not entirely sure if any of them are meeting in person right now, but they are still happening. unfortunately, since the library's meeting spaces aren't available, we're not promoting it on our website under our events calendar. So that information is a little harder to find, but I do know that some of them still are meeting. I spoke with Charles the other day and he said that, yeah, he's still loaning those book sets out. So yeah, if your book club was used to meeting at a certain place and it's not working, well, you know, I don't know how comfortable you all feel about hosting it at your house, but maybe you could meet at a park, or maybe you could meet, you know, somewhere where you can gather safely and also feel comfortable being in a new space. Partnership. So if you're in a book club that is waning, but you've noticed that some of your members belong to other organizations, it might behoove you to see if you can partner with those types of organizations. And a little bit later, I have a slide that has a few community organizations that have started their book clubs. But just to be brief, I know that Bike Walk Wichita has a book club, and also the Great Plains Nature Center has a book club. So those are partnerships with within those organizations where they may have created it, you know, because their members expressed that interest. If you were to poll your members, if you're in a book club, and see what kind of organizations they belong to, you might find it might present itself that some of your members belong to the same organizations. And then if you partner with those different groups, that helps cross promote their services, and then it kind of gives you a chance to expand your membership, because depending on how many people are in those outside organizations, they might actually pull in more people to your group. And then common ground, so uniting under a common interest. This is really important for people who might not feel like there's a group for them outside of what their interest is. So when I was looking through that book, Book Club Reboot, it mentioned that there are certain pastimes that folks have, like knitting. There's knitting guilds and lots of communities where people get together and they knit and they, you know, visit. But some of these knitters had taken it a step further and said, well, we love to knit, but we also love to read. And these are books that we're interested in. So they're not just books about knitting, but these knitters had formed a connection that way and were able to create a book club. Or nurses, you know, if you're working with a group of people and you're like, man, I'd love to socialize with these folks outside of work, but I also understand that I want it to be productive, like not necessarily just having a social hour, but like creating stronger relationships with these people. You might consider creating a book club. I spoke with Suzanne Perez in the first episode of our podcast, and she mentioned that with her coworkers at the Wichita Eagle, she created a book club for them, and then it's been going 20 years strong. So if you're in an industry where you aren't normally talking about what you're reading at work, but you value your coworkers and would be interested in spending time with them outside of work, a book club might be a nice little segue for you to, you know, continue that rapport with those folks outside of office hours. So here briefly is just some local book clubs. And these are not traditional book clubs in the traditional sense. These are kind of more abstract. KMUW has a literary feast where they choose a book once a month and their readers have a virtual discussion. Now, before COVID, they were actually meeting at, I believe they were meeting at Public, or at least they were having food catered by Public. And the food was inspired by the books that they were reading. So that's kind of cool. But the folks over there at KMUW, NPR, our local NPR station, they choose the books and then folks get on and they read. And it's a great opportunity to connect with people in town. It's a great opportunity to see what other people are reading. And then, you know, that food element was really nice when they were meeting in person. In addition to the library, having our library sponsored book clubs, there are bookstores that offer book clubs. And then they really delineate like different types of clubs that they have. So like Watermark, they've got a YA book club, they've got a mystery book club. I mean, they've got, if you get onto their website, they've got so many different book clubs that they are tailoring their collections to. And that's pretty awesome that you can shop at a local bookstore and then make connections with those booksellers and then meet the different readers around. So that's a great opportunity for people who maybe aren't finding those types of traditional book clubs at their library. They can explore what book clubs are at different bookstores. Bike Walk Wichita, as I mentioned, theirs is really fun because, you know, they promote obviously biking and walking, but they usually just meet outdoors and visit about different books. And I will say that a lot of the books that they choose are specifically tailored toward being active outside. So they're not just reading Shakespeare in the park, although that would be fun. Usually it centers around a story or a memoir or narrative about someone who is active outside and promoting those values and the mission of their organization. And then, yeah, like I said, Great Plains Nature Center also has a walking book club. And I see Amanda says, yay, I think Amanda works there, so no problem. I just got on the internet and saw that and I was really excited to see that. Oh, that's great that she started that club for everyone there. So they don't, like I said, book clubs don't have to be, you don't have to be in a room, in a library or in a basement somewhere. You can be outdoors. You can make connections with people that you work with. You can really explore the different options there are. So the limit is the sky, and it can be beyond that if you are into astronomy. But just a shameless plug here. I mentioned we do Read ICT. So if you're not really wanting to join a book club, but you're just wanting to be challenged with reading, this is a great opportunity for people to explore reading outside of their comfort zones. We've got, every year we choose 12 different categories, and we don't choose the book. We let the participants pick their own titles, and then the objective is that you finish the challenge in a year. So if that's one book a month, or if it's, you know, 4 books 1 month and no books for 4 months, you know, however it fits into your schedule, it's not really a competition. It's just to promote reading and diversifying your scope of reading. There's a very active Facebook challenge, Facebook page for the Read ICT Reading Challenge, and you can find that online. People are always posting what they're reading or bookish humor. One wonderful thing about the Reading Challenge, it's been going on for 5 years, and last year we created these monthly drawings. So folks that use our Beanstack app and log at least 1 book a month are entered into a drawing, and then we send out their prize to the branch of their choice. And that's just a fun way to be rewarded for reading, because the kids have summer reading. Why can't adults have a reading challenge? And I've seen a lot of different schools adopt this reading challenge for their teenagers, or I know Miss Cotton at Riverside, she has it. She's got some of her kids that are doing the reading challenge. So the categories change every year. We release them at the end of the previous year. So like the last Sunday of the year, we'll release the categories for the following year. And it's a great way to just try something new without committing to a whole new genre. Read, Return, Repeat is the podcast that we launched this year. So right now we have 2 episodes streaming and the 3rd one's coming out this Friday. And this was a project that I proposed because last year was really hard. Nobody could meet again in the library, and we weren't having our awesome big book swaps that people could come and connect with folks. And so this was an opportunity for me to promote the challenge in a different way. And so each month I release an episode that mirrors one of the categories, and I interview someone that's relevant to the category. And then at the end of the episode, we have staff members that give book recommendations. And so that's a lot of fun for us. We get to use our AV studio and mix up a bunch of cool graphics and things for our listeners and the viewers that watch the videos on YouTube. So if you haven't checked that out, please do. If you have time, it's really low key, very conversational like, but there's a lot of books that are mentioned. So if you're looking for new suggestions, you can find the script of it on the webpage, which is housed on wichitapubliclibrary.org/podcast. And at the end of the script, there is a reading carousel that has all the books that are mentioned. So we've got local book clubs, we've got local challenges. There's also national reading challenges and blogs. Modern Mrs. Darcy is a really popular one. A lot of people like to check out that blog and see what is being recommended. Pop Sugar is also really popular. I've seen several staff members talk about the Book Riot Read Harder Challenge. And this one, I believe it's 20 different categories. So it's kind of like Read ICT, only they go further. They do 20. And when they say read harder, I mean, they mean read harder. Like there's a category that's a book about an animal or a pet that doesn't die, you know, and you really have to think harder about like, what is that going to be? Because there's a lot of animal books where someone passes away at the end. So, so that's a really fun challenge. National challenge if you're interested in just pushing your own reading limits, but not necessarily interested in joining a club. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the presentation with a picture of myself, because why not? But if you need any recommendations or if you have any questions, I definitely would encourage you all to either email me or you can email the library. And we're happy to help anyone who's struggling with reading or needs recommendations. We get paid to do it, so we enjoy it. If anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to ask. I've been monitoring the chat. I see that Julie says, can the podcast be listened to on the phone? Oh, yes, it can. So we create the podcast in the Anchor app, and Anchor is owned by Spotify. So you can listen to it if you're a subscriber of Spotify. Even if you don't subscribe, you can still listen to it. You might hear some ads. And or there's a lot of different podcasts that it gets distributed to. There's like 9 different ones: Anchor, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Overcast. There's just a bunch. But you can also listen to it on the computer. If you go to the wichitapubliclibrary.org/podcasts, there's a little audio file you can click on and listen to it like that. But yeah, we're excited. I just got finished. So first episode, I interviewed Suzanne, the creator of the challenge. The second one, I talked to Priska Barnes. She's the CEO of Story of Time Village, which is a literacy nonprofit here in Wichita. We talk about own voices, which is one of the categories. The third episode, which is set to come out Friday, I talked with Todd Volkman, and he works at Kansas Wildlife Exhibit. So that's in Central Riverside Park. And he's really fascinating. And that one, I would encourage everyone to check out the video, because there's actually going to be an animal ambassador with him that is So adorable. I'm gonna like give you a little spoiler. It's a one-eyed screech owl named Odin. So, I mean, if you have time, you should definitely check that one out on video. And then I just recorded a interview with Jamie Fraser Tracy of Wichita Sedgwick County Historical Museum. And so that mirrors our local history category. With the podcast, I'm not going sequentially. I was kind of jumping around like I did. The first 3 episodes are the first 3 categories, and then the 4th episode mirrors category 8. Okay, I see a question. It says, any recommendations on options on how to choose books each month? I have a list of members I have a list of members' suggestions to choose from, but overall I can hear crickets. And when I ask people's ideas, I don't want to be selfish and just choose books. I want to read, but also, so yeah, I was going to format this as more of a discussion program, being that we be in person, and ask people like, how do you make those choices? Is it a democracy or are we dictators? And sometimes when you're not getting feedback from your participants, it might be helpful for you to kind of curate a little brief synopsis of the books that you're wanting to review. So that way you can kind of give them a little teaser and say, this is what this is about, just like a sentence or 2, and maybe have them rank it as a voting if that's what you're doing. So that way, and as a facilitator, you have to put a little bit more work into it, but the burden falls off of you for having to make all the choices all the time. You might have your folks rank them, and then depending on how they are ranked and which title gets the most or the highest number, that might be the one that you start with first. So that way it can be diplomatic, but you also are forcing them to make that choice with you. It's not just you. Anyone else have any questions? And like I said, feel free to unmute yourself if you just want to speak, or if you feel more comfortable typing it, that's okay too. One thing that I really like, again, I'm going to plug the podcast, but one thing I really like about the podcast is that I'm getting other people recommending books. So on my end, I have to create all of these book lists and include all of these titles, 20 to 30 titles per category, but then getting staff members to highlight books for different categories, it brings in so many more options, things that I'm not even recommending. And so that's nice when that can come outside of me, and I can have other people making those recommendations. Okay, I see another question. How about reaching a compromise between people who only read fiction versus those who only read nonfiction? Oh yeah, that is, again, so I lean toward nonfiction. That's my comfort. And so being part of the reading challenge forces me to try more fiction books. And there are some book clubs that are specifically mystery, and that's their bag, and that's all they want to do, and that's okay. But if you're in a book club where you're wanting to expand what your participants are reading, you might try going back and forth, do fiction 1 month on odd months and nonfiction even months, or vice versa. So that way it's not just feeling like it's the same type of story that you're reading over and over again. Looks like Amanda says they rotate between a fiction, a memoir, and something about a specific topic. So yeah, you can do that. There's also all of this, and I don't know if this is a technical term, but I've heard it. It's called genre blending, where it may be a memoir, but it might also be in the fiction section, if that makes sense. So like Dominicana by Angela Cruz, it's a story taken from her mother's perspective, but it's a fiction story. So you'll find it in the fiction section, even though it's clearly her mother's story. So you can be creative about what you're choosing. I know a lot of people are reading historical fiction right now, where it's like almost reality, but not quite. Like everything's everything's true except for the names of the characters, right? Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's just a little bit it's true, and then everything's a fabrication. I remember preparing myself for the Circe book discussion. I was online listening to what other people were saying about the book, and so many people, well, not so many, there were several people who were very critical about the book and were just diehard, like, this, you can't take the story as a retelling and create this fantasy. But I mean, that's up to the author's discretion. And sometimes that makes it more accessible, because a lot more people are reading about that setting and Circe's life and those characters now with the publication of her book than probably were before. Is it a problem for the library if we choose books that are not in WPL system? Before COVID, that was possible. So yes, I don't know exactly how they're doing that, but before COVID, if you had a book club, you could request book sets through different libraries that belong to, I forget the term, but through interlibrary loan. There was like a local group of libraries where you could borrow from. So if you're wanting to do that, the best thing to do would be reach out to Charles Hankins. It's CHANKINS at wichita.gov. And he can tell you whether or not it's something we own. And if it isn't, and it's something that we have to borrow through interlibrary loan, they do generate a request. I believe that he would be the liaison for the advanced learning library, but each branch librarian or library has their own liaison. So if you belong to Rockwell, you would reach out to Colleen, or if you used Evergreen, you would go with Karina. But you could reach out to them and say, hey, my book club wants to read this story. Can we borrow it through, I believe it's KLE. It's Kansas Learning. No, it's KLE. But I used to work in interlibrary loan. But you can, you would reach out to that liaison, and then they could communicate to the interlibrary loan department and place that request, because they have software that can see which libraries own which book sets. And then if that library is lending, and that's the bigger question, if the library is lending books at that time, then they can make that formal request for you. Okay, I see a question from Julie. Please explain own voices and challenge books in the reading challenge. Oh, sure. So those were the categories that I was really wanting to further the discussion. And so the podcast was really nice to do that. Own voices is a genre that's come up in the last 6 years or 5 years. It was a hashtag on Twitter. Corinne DeVee is the person that created that. And basically what she was trying to do, she was trying to tag books that were written by diverse authors that showcase diverse characters, so that the character reflected the author's experience. So if it was someone who was writing about an immigrant experience, they were actually an immigrant, or if they were writing from the like a Black American experience, like African American experience, they were a person of color, someone in the gay community or LGBTQA community, they were writing from that experience. So it can be really confusing to a lot of folks, because you might think you'd be picking up a book that is, the subject matter is very diverse and you're learning about their experience, but the author might not be of that group. One that came up on the Reading Challenge Facebook page was Memoirs of a Geisha, right? And everybody loves that book, everybody loves the movie, but then we start digging and we see that, oh, the author is this white affluent man who writes the story. And then because of his, he wasn't very sensitive to the nature of the story he was telling. And so one of the characters actually ended up suing him for that, because that put her in jeopardy to some extent. You know, there's a strict code of privacy that these geishas have with their clients. And so he exposed her through that. And so that becomes problematic when you're not writing about your own experience, when you're borrowing someone else's experience. And the challenge books, so challenge books are books that are libraries, either school libraries or public libraries, have items on their shelves that a customer wants to challenge, meaning that they don't want it to be in the system. And so there is a formal form for reconsideration that a customer has to do in order to remove an item or to request removal of an item. And so we didn't want to call it banned books, even though the American Library Association has a banned books week in September, and it's all about censorship. Yes. We wanted to make the category more broad. And so a lot more books are challenged than actually get banned from libraries. And so that's where the challenged name comes into play. It is based on censorship. Yeah, we do have people that come in who are uncomfortable with what is available, especially in school libraries. This becomes problematic. Parents don't like certain materials that their children have access to. The one thing I will say about public libraries is we have a lot more flexibility because we work in loco parentis, which means we don't accept responsibility as the parent would in terms of what the child is exposed to. The burden falls on the caregiver when they bring their child to the library. It's a little different when it's in a school library setting, but in a public library, we don't tell children that they can't look at books in the adult section. And we can be thoughtful about it. Like, you're 7 and you want a graphic novel. We have graphic novels for 7-year-olds in the children's room. But if a child goes exploring and they're not in the company of their guardian or their caregiver, the burden falls on the family. It doesn't fall on the library. Where can we get a list of WPL sponsored book clubs? So that was one question I asked Charles, because I wanted to promote those. But since our library sponsored book clubs aren't meeting in our meeting spaces, it's not published on the website. In a normal setting, that they would be. And we don't have just a traditional list like an Excel file for those clubs. But I will tell you that if you're interested in joining one of those book clubs, you can email me, smcneil@wichita.gov, and I can get in touch with the branch that you're interested in and the staff liaison that facilitates those clubs, because they're the ones that are procuring the books per se. They're not actually attending the book club meetings. So all of the book clubs are volunteer run and led, and the staff members are the ones that are just organizing the materials that the customers need. So yeah, Karen, if you want to get with me, if there's a certain branch that you would want to join. I know that Westlink has a book club. I know that Evergreen has 2. I know that Rockwell has 2, and I believe Alfred has 1. And then the Advanced Learning Library has at least 1. So I can share that information with you. But unfortunately, it's not published on the website right now. Any further questions? Some of them, I believe, are on Zoom. Without speaking to each staff facilitator and knowing, I believe most of them are still meeting virtually. There might be one that's meeting in person, but I haven't gotten confirmation from that. So I'm just going to assume right now that everyone's still meeting virtually on Zoom. And that was one thing that I didn't mention before, but yeah, if you had a book club that was popular and that kind of COVID killed because of meeting in person, and you're interested in meeting online, at least until your members feel more comfortable meeting in person, Zoom is a great option. You can become a free member. And I believe 45 minutes is what they allow each meeting as a free user, basic user. You can also do it through Google Hangouts. And if for whatever reason, like if it's a group that you would meet with people that are in your industry or coworkers, you might have software like Microsoft Teams that you can also use. How does the library handle if a book club gains more members than we can get books for? Well, so in the past, and I don't know if there's a threshold where they stop at, like, you can't have more than 20, but I know that in the past, they would borrow extra books through interlibrary loan at no charge. And Charles, he was responsible for doing that. So, or if it was a staff liaison at one of the branches, they would email the interlibrary loan staff and say, hey, we've got, 10 copies of To Kill a Mockingbird, but we need more. And we can't borrow any out. What they'll try and do first is they'll try and source it as a circulating copy in the system. But if everybody's doing a book report on To Kill a Mockingbird, then they'll extend the courtesy of borrowing it through interlibrary loan at no charge. Do you have any resources for leaders of book clubs, either WPL or you knowing some off the top of your head? So just to get a little bit more context about your question, are we talking about like discussion questions, or are we talking about different types of websites that you can use? More like logistics of running one. Okay. Well, I took some of my information from my PowerPoints from other staff members who've also kind of done the same type of program in years past. No, I don't have any specific information in terms of logistics of running one. But one thing that I would reiterate is if you are running one, establishing those group norms first is really helpful, and getting your participants on board with those. So that way everybody's under the same understanding. If you're creating a book club and you are, and if you're trying to find membership and then you're also trying to find a place to host, I would say that sometimes the easiest time or easiest place to host a book club, again, if we're not in COVID restrictions, is at the library. When we are open back to full capacity, we have meeting spaces that you can use that are free of charge. So some of the library sponsored book clubs, they don't pay for our meeting rooms when they use them, but we do have smaller like study rooms, especially at the Advanced Learning Library. So in a setting where we're open at full capacity, you could come in with your club members and use that space. If you're looking for discussion questions, and I see that, with the book sets, they all do come with discussion questions. And if it's a book that has belonged to the NEA Big Read, so that's the National Endowment of the Arts, there's a lot of popular book club sets that were once big reads. Their website has discussion questions for those titles too. So True Grit, Station 11, what was the Ray Bradbury one? 1984, and yeah, there's a lot of different. So the NEA has been going on for at least a decade, and they've got lots of different titles that we own. Thank you for Fahrenheit 451. How can I forget it? I knew it had a number in it. Yeah, so those all are archived on their website. But again, like I mentioned, all of our book sets, they have these binders, just like a 3-ring binder that goes with the book set. And so that information is available to the book clubs that want to borrow those. And I don't know if I mentioned this or not, but all of those book sets are free. So I know there are people that buy books for book clubs, but if you are trying to market like free books to your book clubs, let them know that you can borrow books from the library for free, and you get even longer than you normally would if you check them out on your own, because we give you 6 weeks. So you can hop onto our website and see a full listing of those, and they give little synopses of each one, and you can see what the book jackets look like. But those are really good. I like, I can't remember if Novelist Plus gives you questions, discussion questions, but it does get into a lot of the details about the books and whether or not they're award winners, or what they've done. The leader, so when you pick up a book set, if you were to indicate to us that, oh, my book club wants to pick them up at the Rockwell branch, we would bundle them and send them to the Rockwell branch, and then each member could pick up their own book at their leisure, and they could return it to whichever branch they wanted to. It doesn't have to come back to that branch. They would need a library card. It's free to get a library card if you've never had one before. If you've had one and for whatever reason you lost it, it's $2 to get a new one. So yeah, we do check them out on your library card, and that goes with also books that we borrow from interlibrary loan. We have to attach those to an account. So you can pre-register for your library card online, and then you just show up to any branch and fill out a little form and sign it, and then you can get your card then. But it's really easy and worth the trouble to get free books. So I would encourage you to share that with your participants, and then they can start borrowing as well. And also, if they get a library card, you know, some of these books are available as ebooks. So they wouldn't even have to come into a physical library. I believe we're still issuing e-cards over the phone. So the difference between an e-card and an actual physical card, obviously a physical card, you can check out physical things, but with an e-card, we can get that issued over the phone, and then you have access to our digital ebooks or digital e-audiobooks that are on our Libby app. And then you can also get a state library card, which gives you access to even more ebooks through their cloud library app. Any more questions? Yeah, we've had to be really creative about getting cards into people's hands this past year. And, you know, in a normal year, we wouldn't issue cards over the phone, but we were like, you know what, we got to get them out there to people. People need to keep reading, and not everybody feels comfortable coming to the library. So, so we want to do that for you. Any last minute questions? Oh yeah, you're welcome, Anne. Thank you everybody for joining me today. If you have any questions that you forgot to ask, you go ahead and email me. I'm going to send in the chat the link to the evaluation form before I forget. But like I said, if there's anything that you want to mention in the form, programming that you want to see the library do, you know, let us know. Or if there's something that I forgot to mention that you're curious about, you know, let me know. We review all of these forms, and then we use that information to plan future programming. And one thing I will say is, you know, we have to plan our programming 6 months in advance. So if you're coming up with any cool ideas, bear that in mind, that it probably won't get on the calendar for a while, but we'll definitely watch it. Well, thank you all for joining me today. I don't see any more questions. I appreciate everyone's time. I'm going to go ahead and keep my window open for just a little bit longer so everybody can access that link. But yeah, if you haven't joined Read ICT, you should. It's great. And if you have time, listen to the podcast or watch the videos on YouTube. They're a lot of fun. If you are curious about reading recommendations, like I mentioned, you can fill out the reading recommendation list online, and we can make recommendations for you just by asking you a few questions about what you like to read, or you can get online and see what people are reading on the Read ICT Challenge Facebook page. There's a lot of different organizations out there who are promoting reading and getting out there and joining groups. So thank you all for joining me tonight. Really appreciate it. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording bit. And yeah, I hope everyone has a wonderful Monday. Thanks again for all your patience.